What's up, everybody? Happy Friday. Last show before we head to New Orleans for Super Bowl. Gonna be a good one. Here's what we have coming up today. So, NBA All-Star selections are out. Who got snubbed? We'll talk about that. Plus, the 305. Oh, man. You thought Jimmy Butler drama was going off. Terry Rozier being investigated federally. We'll talk about that. Plus, never have I ever said that I wouldn't trade my MVP for a Super Bowl championship. Who are we talking about? All that and more coming up.
What's up, everybody? Happy Friday, and welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield here with you guys. We got a great show. That's why I'm choked up. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating, and watch us here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, and get ready, because it is the week before. Jesse is right, Dad. Last day before we all get ready to head out to New Orleans over the weekend and get ready for Super Bowl licks. I'm really glad. I think it was Gronk that said that on some sort of ad that made my life a lot easier, because I saw also Bo Allen, former Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl champion, former Tampa Bay Buck and New England Patriot, said, I don't know how to read Roman numerals, and it's too late in the game for me to ask. I am so glad more people are living my truth in public, warring against this antiquated, dumbass way of presenting the Super Bowl each and every year. So we got licks this year to at least bail us out, because it looks like an actual word.
Ha! I never thought of it that much. I didn't mind Roman numerals. They get difficult at some point, but I don't mind them. Would I like a number better? Yeah, I probably would like a number better, in all honesty. But that's not where I'm not going to die on that hill.
I mean, you remember when we got Super Bowl 50 and the NFL just did a big gold 50? That should have been it. That should have been the buzzers going off. Because, Dad, you know when Roman numerals get difficult? When the L's start getting involved. Now we got all sorts of shapes and figures in here. Before, it was just a bunch of X's, I's, and V's. And now we got a fourth one introduced here. No, do not pass go. Do not collect $200. I'm not having a good time anymore.
Yeah, like I said, when you have to subtract, I think that's where it gets iffy.
Yes.
When you have to subtract. That's the part to me that gets a little more confusing. So I'm with you there.
I honestly know so little about Roman numerals. You're like, it gets tricky when you have to subtract, and I don't even know what you're talking about. I'm just like, yeah, that is tricky. That's complicated.
No. You know what? I agree. You know what you say. Honestly, next year though, pretty cool one. LX. That's going to be fun.
Yeah.
Or is it XL next year? I don't even know. No, it's LX.
No,
it's additive, so it's on the end.
Yeah. XL would be 40. Yeah, it's LX.
Okay.
Damn,
that sounds like a
getting the
car.
Big Boy Super Bowl.
Okay.
Yeah.
Honestly, yes. Super Bowl or luxury SUV. New game coming up next week when we get to Radio Row. And, Dad, this will be an exciting one here. The last time the Super Bowl in New Orleans, we know it was when the lights went out, the 49ers and the Baltimore Ravens. And now we get a rematch of the Super Bowl from 2 years ago. We've got, plenty to get to on that front today. Tim Grunhard, former Kansas City Chiefs offensive lineman, former Notre Dame offensive lineman, someone our family knows near and dear, going to help us take a look at the Kansas City side of things. As Dad, for all these teams, Kansas City, who this is so second nature, all of the preparation and the lead up to the Super Bowl for the core of this roster, something that everyone's intimately familiar with, something that Andy Reid and this coaching staff certainly know how to take these guys through. As we often hear, the bulk of your game planning is done this week while you're back at home. The work that everyone does here in preparation for next week. And Dad, you can speak to this, especially as someone that's covered the game in the last couple of years and been around these players in the lead up. Everything about your schedule next week, decidedly abnormal. All the ticket requests, your family being around there, all the media obligations. And so the bulk of what they are going to do in terms of getting ready for the nuts and bolts of the football put to bed this week.
Yeah, it is. And Kansas City is so used to the process, right, of going through the tickets, of who's handling all the tickets and who's handling all the minutia that's involved with it. They have a lot of, obviously, experience. So, and for those on the team that haven't been there the last couple of times, there's plenty of guys on the team that could tell them how to go through it. For the Eagles, obviously it's only been a couple of years since they were in the Super Bowl, so they have plenty of guys that have gone through it and gone through the process. So you really don't have a new coach going through this that has to call maybe other coaches, and that's what they do. They call other coaches that have gone through it and say, kind of what's your schedule like? Much like when you guys played in the title game and had 40-some days, Brian Kelly talking to other coaches who had gone through that on how, you set your schedule. These two teams are pretty flush in setting their schedule. And quite honestly, I mean, by the end of next week, they just can't wait to play the game because of the responsibilities. Everything is just ticked up a level for everybody, not just the stars. They're going to have to be in front of the media a lot anyway, but for everybody, even those that aren't used to talking are going to have to talk and be involved in media situations. So by midweek, they're ready to play the game and ready to put everything aside.
Someone that a lot of people are going to be wanting to talk to, especially if this trends in the right direction, could be Brandon Graham, who last time the Eagles won a Super Bowl made one of the most important plays in modern Philadelphia Eagles history and had been dealing with an injury for the majority of this season. He was a triceps injury back in November against the Rams that had kept him out. And now, Dad, they've opened up his practice window, so they're getting him back on the field to try and see if he might actually be ready to come back and play in this game. Now, it's interesting, Dad, because he's a guy who no doubt ton of experience, all-time great player for the franchise, super important veteran voice, and would also be coming back in at a time where the Eagles had sort of tightened that rotation along the defensive front. Vic Fangio and company had basically been running with the guys out there, Jalen Carter, Milton Williams, on the edge. Why am I blanking on
Nolan Smith.
Name? Nolan Smith. And so you would kind of tighten the rotation with a lot of those guys. And so how much do you change this up, or are you willing to, getting a guy back like Brandon Graham, hasn't played football in a while, but is capable of making game-changing play, especially in the stage?
When you can put a guy in a rotation that can be effective, you put a guy in the rotation that can be effective. It's a guy who played 11 games, had 3.5 sacks, 6 tackles for losses, but a lot of times that's not all measured by the stat book. It's what you force behind the line of scrimmage, and he is a force behind the line of scrimmage. So you find a place for him. You just have to realize, okay, are you going to use him enough to take up a roster spot of maybe a special team guy? who is going to, play a lot on special teams. But I think with a guy like Brandon Graham, a guy who can rush the way he can rush, if he's anywhere near 100%, you add him to the rotation. Because as you well know, as an offensive lineman, there's 5 of you against, could be 8 defensive linemen. You roll in fresh legs, and if you have the ability to run, 7, 8 deep, 6, 7, 8 deep, you find that rotation. And I believe Brandon Graham, if he's healthy enough, would be part of that.
Well, and I think going back to, because this is also going to be interesting for the Eagles, who you mentioned are back here after 2 years, but it is a largely different group. Like, I don't think the Georgia contingent on this roster of Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter were guys that were on that Eagles team back when they came to the Super Bowl here. And so any big game like this, the adrenaline rush, all of the ways it takes it out of you physically that are different, having someone like that, because Jalen Carter and those guys, they've been on the field. Josh Sweat on the other side, been on the field. And so to add some juice, especially on the outside, Dad, because as we get into the matchup of this game, we're going to talk a lot about the Chiefs' reworked offensive line with Joe Thuney at left tackle against an Eagles defensive front that hasn't necessarily been one that's garnered as much pressure from the edge as it has from the interior, where Jalen Carter's been so great this year. And so now if you're Brandon Graham and you give them a little bit of boost in that area where the Chiefs have no doubt been the weakest on their offensive line, I think that can definitely become interesting. So again, lots to get into with this game and the matchups as we get ready to set out to New Orleans next week. Again, we will be live from Radio Row all next week, same time, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 to 9 a.m. local, out in Radio Row. Plenty of great guests all week, plenty of great side quests all week. I've got a little food-related tour that we're getting ready to release to you guys next week, which we're very excited to show people. Just got some of the early video back on that today.
And to your point, really going back to it, I pulled it up really quick, the box score of the Eagles and Chiefs, 38-35, Chiefs win. And I'm looking on the defense, no Jordan Davis, no obviously Jalen Carter, it was Fletcher Cox then, no Nolan Smith as far as showing up on the defensive stats. So yeah, different players that will have an impact on the game.
No doubt. And I mean, that God extends to the second level. Zach Bond was not here. Certainly Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, and all the guys rookies, in there. Yeah, so that Eagles defense, that's been one of the strengths of this team. Almost all guys that are going to be new to this stage, this young in their career. So again, we are very excited to dive into more of that matchup. We will get also to the questions for each team that lost in the championship round coming up today, and some news out of the NCAA. With the ACC, it seems like getting ready to play nice with each other for a while. We will tell you the important date to worry about for the rest of college football fresh off this news. Go ahead, Dad.
And I'm wrong. Jordan Davis did play, didn't have any stats, but did play. So I just want to be factually correct.
All right, there we go. We're gonna get that in come hell or high water here. Congratulations to Jordan Davis on your return trip to the Super Bowl. I almost called it the national championship. Let you know how far my brain is still on coping with that. So we've got all that fun to get to now, and we're very excited about that coming up, Dad. Unfortunately, what we have to talk about next is the complete opposite vein in terms of tenor. And just ahead of it right now for anyone here, what we're going to talk about has, explicit content in it, content that could be triggering to people that have been, victims of sexual assault in the past or anything like that. So just want to give everyone fair warning as we get set to discuss the accusations made against Ravens kicker Justin Tucker, who was accused of inappropriate sexual behavior by 6 massage therapists in the Baltimore area, according to an investigation by the Baltimore Banner. The Banner got tipped off January 9th. 6 massage therapists contacted the outlet to allege that Tucker had exposed his genitals, brushed 2 of them with his exposed penis, and left what they believed to be ejaculate on the massage table after 3 of his treatments. The allegations occurred between 2012 and 2016, where Justin Tucker's first 5 years in the NFL. About an hour after the article posted, Dad, Justin Tucker put out a statement of his own, called the allegations unequivocally false in a lengthy note that he put on social media. And the NFL and the Baltimore Ravens also both released statements as well. The NFL, we became first aware of the allegations from the reporter investigating this story. They were not previously shared with the NFL. We take the allegations seriously, and we will look into the matter. The Baltimore Ravens sort of echoed the same sentiment. And so Dad, unfortunately, all of this for everyone on the outside, eerily similar to what we went through with Deshaun Watson, both in the nature of the allegations and how it comes out. And I think the course of action that happens here, it's terrible that we sort of know what's going to go on procedurally here. But again, Justin Tucker in his note said, paraphrasing here, but he supports any process that allows people to come forward here and certainly voice their concerns and accusations for something this serious, but he unequivocally denies it. And Dad, we're going to wait for this process that we know very well to play out here. But much like Deshaun Watson, it's so incredibly disappointing, again, because of what we thought we know about these people on the outside. It's a great reminder that we really don't know these players. We really don't know a lot of the figures involved in here, because Deshaun Watson beforehand was a banner citizen. People thought at Clemson he was one of the great stories in college football. And Justin Tucker had always been lauded for who he had been, not only for the Baltimore Ravens, but around that city. And so to now see these allegations come out is a stark reminder that we do need to always check our priors at the door when serious accusations like this come out, and allow these accusations and allegations to be heard and the process to go from here.
Yeah, and like we did with Deshaun Watson, is let the process play out, the investigation. Now there were 22 or more therapists that came out and spoke out against Deshaun, and there was an investigation, and obviously it led to the suspension and such. And this again it's 2025, and these were allegations from 2012 to 2016. So I'm sure that will make people raise an eyebrow. But as Justin Tucker said, I support a process that allows claims to be properly investigated. So he's saying, listen, okay, if it's years after, so be it. Let's let it be properly investigated. But he absolutely denies any wrongdoing as well. Of all the things that you listed out, it's going to become a situation of these, at this point, 6 massage therapists being interviewed, I would imagine, by the NFL investigation, I would think, and to see what, and Justin Tucker to be talked to as well, and to come to some conclusion. But to your greater point, these allegations are obviously serious allegations that he denies, but to your point of you don't know players off the field. And I'm not saying Justin Tucker is guilty of this, but I'm not saying he's not. There's going to be an investigation involved, but it is a point to say, you see players on the field and hear them in the media, but you don't really know them. Deshaun Watson, who was obviously suspended for this, you're right. I mean, he was a model from the outside looking in, was a model citizen in Houston, and everybody was like, wow, I mean, what are these claims? And then by so many women, and we found out what we found out. So like with Deshaun, we wait for the investigation. We wait for the investigation with Justin Tucker, but you unfortunately, if Justin is innocent of this, I can see him screaming from the mountaintop, I didn't do anything wrong. I've never been accused. I mean, all of a sudden it's 8 years or 9 years past the fact. I've never done anything inappropriate. We'll see what comes out.
I think I bring up the priors more so to say that we shouldn't let us, because none of us know him personally here. This might be different calculus for his teammates and the people that know him personally, but for us on the outside to just see what you thought you knew of a player and use that to potentially influence how you view this situation. I guess my only request is, hey, we don't personally know these people, and so we need to consider all of these allegations and not say, oh, well, because this person seemed like a nice guy to me, I can't take these seriously. I won't take these seriously here, as often was the case for so long in instances like this when it came to sexual assault, sexual battery against women. Now, Dad, the course of action that you mentioned with the NFL, I do think is the part that it bears repeating as well here, because none of the women who spoke with the banner took their allegations to law enforcement, and legal experts told the banner, said that there are some criminal statutes that might have applied if the allegations were proven true, but the statute of limitations has expired, and in any event, such cases are rarely prosecuted. And even in civil court cases, this could face a very high bar for success. And so what we're talking about for Justin Tucker relative to the NFL is going to be similar to what happened with Deshaun Watson, where, again, There was a whole bevy of civil cases here. A lot of those were, settled and the things that happened there.
Right.
But then he was still ultimately suspended because the NFL did an investigation, and based on their findings, they believed Deshaun Watson was guilty of enough. They reviewed, I believe, 4 cases in that case and decided he was guilty enough for them to suspend for the 11 games. And so while, again, the legal process is going to be one entity of this for Justin Tucker, the other side with the NFL at this juncture is going to be an entirely different one where they'll conduct their own investigation, and based on their findings, that's where they can start to do anything punitive.
As you mentioned, that the statute of limitations maybe runs out for some of this. In legal terms, civil cases are you don't have to prove as much to civilly win, whether they go that route or not. But then an NFL investigation is not law by any stretch of the imagination. That's just in the interpretation of those listening to the complaints and deciding what they want to do. And again, on Justin's part, I mean, what this also does, I mean, is it just screams about your character as well, right? If you did it, then you should be suspended. If you didn't, then you scream from the highest mountaintop, or at least, try to, that, hey, this is all patently false against me.
Yeah, again, it's disturbing allegations. Everyone needs to take this very seriously, and it's just a sad, disappointing day for people around the NFL and the player in question here. We'll be back after this with more on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr., and Mike Golic Sr. Fellas, we all know the game, have you ever? Maybe not you, Senior, but the rest of us do. So, have you ever, let's play, have you ever considered trading in your MVP for a championship? One former MVP was asked just that, and his response has people kind of scratching their heads.
What's more important, impact or championships? You look at a guy like Allen Iverson, or you stood up on the table and blah, 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 blah. Everybody's not going to be Michael Jordan. Everybody's not going to be Patrick Mahomes. Everybody's not going to be these individuals who have the luxury of saying, hey, I not only dominated this sport, but I also have championships to back it. Like, let me remind you, Brad Johnson won a Super Bowl. Trent Dilfer won a Super Bowl. Respectfully, Nick Foles won a Super Bowl. So, yes, when you look at those guys and you say, okay, what's more important? Would you have preferred to win a Super Bowl? I think that's the humble approach. But if we're being honest, the impact of you holding yourself accountable to say everybody has a responsibility to do. And you can say as an MVP award winner or an All-American, you've held yourself or you've held your end of the bargain down.
Cam Newton laying it all out there. Cam Newton, have you ever considered not wearing hats like that? Are you guys surprised by his answer, by his reasoning? Do you agree? Do you disagree? What do you think?
Yeah, Dad, this is interesting because so often we treat the Super Bowl, understandably, as we're getting ready to embark on Super Bowl week, as the ultimate prize. And they sort of treated it like a throwaway line, did Stephen A. on the show when he led into that, assuming, yes, of course, you would trade your MVP to go back and have the Super Bowl go the opposite way for you if you're Cam Newton. And he says no. And, Dad, it's interesting insight from someone who's actually gotten it. And I think part of the justification is understandable that, hey, and I heard Chris Canty mention this on the Unsportsmanlike show at ESPN. If you're handling your business and you're the MVP, chances are your team is very good and you're giving them a shot to win a Super Bowl. So I can understand from that logic, even if it sort of runs counter to everything that we think of team sports.
Yeah, first and foremost, your mother and I are watching Cam Newton on that show Special Forces. There's one episode left, and he's in it, as well as Golden Tate, former Domer, former NFLer as well. I think there's 5 contestants left, and they are 2 of them that are left. And boy, oh boy, the last episode, they got put through it from a physical standpoint, carrying those 50-pound kits around. It's been unreal. It's been fun to watch.
What is this show?
That show seems like it is. They put like celebrities through special forces workouts and like through the experience of being in the military type thing. We showed footage on this show of Cam Newton jumping out of a boat onto an active helicopter and having to pull himself up into that. And I also saw a highlight of him whooping somebody's ass. They put them in the gloves and had them just box on some cliff. And Cam Newton kind of beat somebody's ass. He seems like he's crushing that show.
He beat a swimmer, and his name Adrian. His name is escaping me right now. He beat some tall swimmer. The swimmer, by the way, who they interview before these events, this swimmer before he had to face Cam Newton said, "I have never been in a fight in my life. I don't know how to fight." This dude, while he was big, he's an Olympic medalist, gold medalist, and he had no idea. And going up against Cam Newton, so that was going to end how it did, and it ended his time on Special Forces. But all right, so that being said, there's one more episode of that. Let's see if either he or Golden Tate can be the last person standing in that. First, what Chris Canty said is correct. If you're the MVP, you're normally on a extremely good team, right? And we think the MVP this year is at least going to be on a playoff team that, a Buffalo Bills team or a Baltimore Ravens team. It was Nathan Adrian. Okay, I knew your mother would text it to me. Nathan Adrian, an Olympic swimmer, is who Cam Newton fought.
Perfect.
So you're going to be on a good team, normally a playoff team, if not a Super Bowl team, because remember, it is a regular season award. I may be one of the better people to answer this because Cam was an MVP. I was a starter half of my career. So I'm kind of that guy of, would I trade in if I was this guy and won a Super Bowl as opposed to winning it'd be difficult for me to win an MVP as a defensive lineman, defensive player of the year, and not win the Super Bowl. So so it's tough for me to come from the side of the great player because I wasn't one. I just wasn't. I was always the team guy, carried my lunch pail, did whatever the team asked, and again, started basically half my career. So I was a Super Bowl champion was the goal at all times. If I could have snuck in a Pro Bowl, would that have been cool? Yeah, it would have been cool, but it didn't happen. So for me, it was like team goals, win the Super Bowl. I was never in the air of up for a Defensive Player of the Year or an MVP award, and take the Hall of Fame out of this, because people say, would you rather have a Hall of Fame or an MVP or a Super Bowl? I mean, Hall of Fame, is rarefied air. I mean, people will all take the Hall of Fame. So it's tough to answer in my position because I've never been a better player in the league, but I do know if you are up for the MVP, you are on a really good team, so you technically could get both. If you could guarantee your shot as a my-level player that you win a Super Bowl, or you're an MVP and you let the dice roll on whether you're going to win the Super Bowl, I would probably take the MVP because there's a good chance you're a really good team and you have a chance to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I would agree. This is different than the argument we've positioned for a long time where it's, would you rather win a Super Bowl and be a rotational player on that team, or be the best player on whatever team you're on, but your team be bad? In this version that we're talking about with Cam's argument, you can be both, because being the MVP usually means you're on a good team. So with that logic, I actually kind of agree with it. Would I rather take this acknowledgement that I individually have gotten to the mountaintop of my sport, and then by consequence, then giving my team a great chance to maybe get to there at some point, versus the bird in the hand where now all of a sudden I'm more middle of the pack, or at the very least Dad's still at the top but just not getting that recognition here, feels a little more justifiable.
Because you have to qualify your worth to the team. If you're on a team, you're on a team. You're good enough to be on a team. But your play, your impact on the team, right? Because after I was released by the Dolphins, I did run for the 49ers in 94. I ran for them in like week 12. And they were thinking of signing me, and then a linebacker got hurt or something, and they didn't. Regardless, if they were to sign me, they went on to win the Super Bowl that year. And I've said on air, I would not have felt very much part of that team. I would have been there the last part of the season and the Super Bowl run. I would not have been on the team the whole time. I would have been a minor contributor. There would have been not a ton of satisfaction outside of the process of going through and playing in the Super Bowl, because I wouldn't have been much a part of it like I was more in Philadelphia. You know, being a part-time starter, part-time rotational player, is more involved, where that would have meant a hell of a lot more to me than signing with a team with 4 or 5 games to go and going on winning the Super Bowl. So you have to put into in what context. Are you a special teamer? Are you a rotational player? Because if you're just on the bench and never play, I mean, there's no question of what you want to do.
No, exactly. So I do think that's important context. I don't know. It's interesting to me to think about, Dad, if you would trade that, like if you're Cam Newton, trade your MVP, but you've got your same career. You're still the great player on the team. You are still an MVP caliber player, but now all of a sudden the script flips the other way and you win that Super Bowl, and you are still every part of Cam Newton's career, but you're Super Bowl champion instead of MVP. I actually think that goes a pretty long way, Dad, in terms of how we talk about Cam. Like, if I'm Cam Newton and I'm just saying I swap 1 for 1 and everything else about my career is the same, I think we think more highly of Cam Newton than we do right now.
I would swap 1 for 1. I would swap 1 for 1 MVP for Super Bowl. Yes, I would. One MVP where you were, again, if you're considered for the MVP, but like Lamar Jackson, if Lamar Jackson loses the MVP, hell, he was in the running for the MVP. If Cam would have just lost the MVP that year, I don't know who came in second the year he won it, but they would have won a Super Bowl, I would trade that. I would trade 1 MVP for 1 Super Bowl. Now, if you're talking multiple MVPs, now you're getting also into rarefied air of multiple MVPs. Maybe it's a different story. But would I trade 2 MVPs for 2 Super Bowls? Again, I'm giving Cam the benefit of the doubt of still being an MVP level player, but just not winning the award. And then, so not winning the MVP and winning the Super Bowl, I would take the Super Bowl without question.
Well, and like everyone would know, because he brought up the list of quarterbacks that understandably get brought up all the time for being lesser quarterbacks who are on Super Bowl winning teams, and where we all understand as we go back through the annals of history, yeah, those guys don't necessarily belong in the same conversations. But if you're a quarterback of Cam Newton's caliber, and I get it, there are a ton of quarterbacks in this range, but like the guys you're talking about, there's a whole litany of quarterbacks that have won Super Bowl, Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers from this last generation, who are talked about in a different bracket of former quarterbacks than Cam Newton is because of that. So I think the Super Bowl, and whether or not you're the Super Bowl MVP, I think if they had won the Super Bowl, Cam more than likely the Super Bowl MVP for that Carolina Panthers team. And so all of that, I do think, like, if you're Cam Newton and you're doing the math on this, I think it would be inherently more valuable for you as that key player to have a Super Bowl on your resume rather than the MVP on your resume that people, I think, sort of scoff at comparatively, right, wrong, or indifferent. We treat Super Bowls as a quarterback coronation. We treat that as the award that separates you from your peers, regardless of the presence of the MVP or not. We never talk about that with a bunch of those other quarterbacks that are all-time Hall of Fame caliber players, but that just don't have a regular season MVP maybe to their hardware.
Especially the MVP award is basically a quarterback award with a running back thrown in there every now and then, right? So it's basically a quarterback award anyway. But you're right. So much is put on winning the Super Bowl to a quarterback. Jalen Hurts could be a great example. You know, at times one of the better quarterbacks in the league, but not up for MVP. But very well this year could be a Super Bowl winning quarterback, right? And that on your resume is tough to beat.
I mean, Drew Brees is a great example of that. Drew Brees, one NFL first-team All-Pro, never an MVP, but a Super Bowl champion, and albeit now the one that happened for the Saints. Certainly there is so much more baked into that than maybe just an ordinary Super Bowl. But the way we talk about Drew Brees, Dad, as one of the all-time greats of that generation, despite having one Super Bowl and no MVP, I think very different than how we talk about Cam Newton in a lot of ways.
Yeah, listen, another quarterback. You think Dan Marino? Dan Marino was 84's NFL MVP. Had a career year over 5,000 yards passing. Would he have traded that in to get a Super Bowl victory?
Dan Marino does feel like the one quarterback, and I don't know why it is. Maybe it's just because Dan Marino, ability-wise, like such a cannon. Everyone acknowledges what a freak he was. He feels like the one we kind of give a pass in the Super Bowl conversation. We're like, yeah, Dan Marino was still a bad man, though. Like, we all acknowledge he was still a bad man. But you're right. If Dan Marino has a Super Bowl, now all of a sudden we probably get free reign to involve him in a lot more conversations about the guys in that upper tier of quarterbacks who maybe only just got one along the way. So I'm with you. Seems like interesting calculus for Cam Newton in this conversation. But again, uniquely qualified to answer that. It'll be interesting to see the continued ripple effect from other former, because Dan, I was bracing for the wave of former players to come out and call him selfish, and to people to look at that and say this is a team game, ultimate team sports stuff. I'm glad that we didn't go for the low-hanging fruit on that. That makes me smile.
But we did kind of change our mind, didn't we? That we would, because we kind of said, yeah, we get the MVP over the Super Bowl. What we kind of changed our mind. We kind of said if you're one MVP or a one-time MVP or a one-time Super Bowl winning quarterback, that you'd probably take the Super Bowl winning quarterback. That would probably carry you a little further.
Yeah, no, I think we decided, though, that if I'm going to think about this selfishly, actually the Super Bowl would be the better route to go than the individual NFL MVP. At GoJo Golic on Twitter, what is the more impressive resume point for a star quarterback? Having an MVP or having a Super Bowl victory? The player is the same no matter what, the ability-wise, all the other accomplishments, but you swap out that one award for the other here, and I think the answer would be overwhelmingly in favor of the Lombardi. Coming up next, let's talk about two teams that are going to try and get back for their shot at a Lombardi next season here on GoJo Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr. here with you guys on a Friday. So we've been discussing the NFL playoff losers, as one does, and what they need to address in the offseason, okay? So with the Super Bowl looming, let's take a look at the teams that fell just one game short. You hate to see it. The Commanders, guys. Fellas, year one under new ownership. What a time to be alive. They absolutely went off. How impressed are you guys with Jaden Daniels and Dan Quinn? How bright is the future in D.C.? They have to wear shades. Their future's so bright, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, no, definitely sunglasses on inside for Washington, no matter where they go, on the count of the brightness of said future. And, Dad, it was a great season, but it's one that's interesting as we've sort of been asking big questions for each of the playoff losers ahead of the offseason, what they can go for. A lot of them, the further along we get, a little bit less you need to work on. These were rosters that were pretty close to winning. The Buffalo Bills are going to be a great example of that, you don't know how much you do for them. A team like the Baltimore Ravens, a team like the Detroit Lions that just seems like they need to get healthy. For Washington, I think there's an acknowledgement well ahead of schedule and a roster that is furthest behind of the ones that made it to this Final Four, because you look at that defense that ultimately wasn't able to stop anybody, and once the offense kind of reverse turnover polarity had a bad time, I think there's plenty of room to improve after what a season that no doubt sends up the signal. We are open for business. We've got a legitimate weapon at quarterback that could be attractive to free agents and other people looking at our program differently, and they have erased the Dan Snyder stench from that group, which is the most important byproduct of this season.
Well, I mean, it looks like you have two veterans coming back, and Zach Ertz said he'd like to come back, and he had a really good year. And Bobby Wagner, a linebacker on defense. Now, they certainly need some help defensively. They were top 3 against the pass, but bottom 3 against the run. Could they use an old lineman, a tackle possibly? But one thing that I do not think T. Higgins will be back on Cincinnati, because I don't think Cincinnati can afford, especially after paying Jamar Chase $40 million. Washington Commanders have about $82 million in cap space. Go after T. Higgins. Get a complimentary piece for McLaurin, right? Don't have it be your tight end, Zach Ertz, who is a great piece, but make him part of a 3-piece, not a 2-piece. So I would spend the money and get T. Higgins. T. Higgins is going to be on another team because T. Higgins is going to get paid somewhere. And he would be a guy, if I'm Washington, you have the cap space to get. Because you have a couple of years to play around, because Jaden Daniels on that rookie wage scale for another couple of years before you have to even worry about paying him. So this is the time to make hay.
I guess my thought process is, though, Dad, with the capital that you've got available, yeah, it'd be sick to have T. Higgins opposite Terry McLaurin in this offense, or to maybe add some depth to the offense. But your defense was pretty bad in critical moments here.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you've got money, sure enough, the offense still ripped. It still put up a ton of points, went toe-to-toe. We watched them put up 1 million points against the Lions and all these different teams. I do feel like defensively, whether it's, hey, remember all those pass rushers you let go a few years ago in Montez Sweat and Chase Young, might be fun to restock the coffers there so that Frankie Louvu's not one of the guys leading your teams in sacks and pressures. Maybe on the back end, getting a secondary that can stick with some people and give you a shot of shutting people down so you can move Mikey Sainer still back inside. Like, that would be the area I would look at. Defensively, you need some playmakers on that side of the football to help give your offense more of a chance to go out and not feel like they have to score every drive.
And I think you have money to do both. I think you have money to get T. Higgins and get defensive players. And then maybe you can look at the defense in the draft as well. Sanders still came in as a rookie and did an excellent job. Maybe you go offensive tackle. I mean, they're obviously going to pick late in the first round. You go offensive tackle, or do you you throw in get an edge rusher? But I think you can also go defense in free agency as well. They have money to play with. That's for sure. So while they're the team with probably the most need of roster moves, because they were a surprise team this year, they definitely have the money to do it.
Yeah, that'll be I think that's the nice part for them, is you do feel like you're at a great spot because you came together in the way that Houston did last year. Now, that's the cautionary tale, is the Houston Texans. You are not guaranteed success that second year after your rookie quarterback popped. And so you've got to make sure things progress the right way. Bobby Slowick was a big-time guy guy last year that everyone was looking at in the coaching cycle, on his ass fire this year. Cliff Kingsbury enjoyed a great renaissance this first season. Next year, does any of that stuff that bothered him in the past all of a sudden start to come up in terms of the play calling getting stale? So all things you got to keep an eye on, but because Jaden Daniels is a different kind of quarterback and that he can get you out of trouble, I do worry less about some of the same stuff that's pitfalled Houston coming up here and all of a sudden affecting the Washington Commanders. So, Dad, ultimately, like, I don't know if it would be reasonable to expect an NFC championship run again from them next year,
right?
Given the fact that, hey, the Lions, when they get healthy, are still going to be one of the best rosters in football, albeit they lost damn near everyone on their coaching staff. The Eagles look like they're still going to be the standard bearer in the NFC for a while. The Vikings, the rest of the NFC North. It's a tall task, but like you said, money and at least the clear win of we know who our quarterback is makes team building a lot easier.
Yeah, it really does. And the guy who came on, Olamide Zaccheaus, the wide receiver, he came on as well to add to
De'Ami Brown in the postseason.
Yeah. I mean, guys did step up. So yeah, and I still think the AFC is deeper than the NFC. So we'll see. We'll see about the run Washington can continue to make. We'll again see about Jaden Daniels and the sophomore slump that they talk about that C.J. Stroud went through. And remember, Daniels was still sacked 47 times, and that's on a rookie quarterback and an O-line, which really we thought came together better than we thought they may with the pieces that they put into place. So there can be some improvement there as well.
Yeah, they're going to be an interesting team to watch. Again, I wouldn't hate bolstering the offensive line. Like, you had a group of veterans who, especially for Wiley and a couple of those guys, were cut from that Kansas City cloth. Good pedigree. Biadasz came with Dan Quinn, had an understanding of what they wanted to do, a great voice for a rookie quarterback. But especially with the Sam Cosmi injury now factored in, I think bolstering your depth along that, knowing, hey, protecting the quarterback still going to be the ultimate job that we have now that we got one. Going to be important there. Let's look on the other side, the AFC, Dad, the Buffalo Bills. Similar position for them, asking the question of what they need to do to finally kick through that Chiefs wall and get into a Super Bowl appearance here. What's the biggest question that you have for them going into the offseason?
Well, I mean, probably the defensive side as well. They were middle of the pack total defense. Lower third against the pass, top third against the rush. Probably need help on offense or on the defensive side. I also think James Cook had 207 carries, had 16 touchdowns. Give him the ball more. I mean, let him run a little more. I thought he was a hell of, had over 1,000 yards. Now, 1,000 yards in 17 games isn't what 1,000 yards isn't what it used to be. But still, I think he could have got more carries. Now, Josh Allen is going to get his runs, but I think they could have used him a little more as a workhorse. What do you do with Amari Cooper? Do you bring him back? That's going to be a question. They don't have the cap space. They're like a 10 or 11 million over the cap, I think. So they don't have the money to work with like Washington does. But I would think you have Josh Allen, you have a running back, you have a tight end, you have a wide receiver you may tinker with, but I would work on the defensive side.
I think defense is going to be important. Like, Von Miller probably going to be a cap casualty for this team, and what you brought him there to do is kind of what you're going to need going forward, because I think Greg Rousseau had a big year this year. We talked about him a lot early in the season. Now, some of his, deep stats trailed off at the end of the season a bit relative to he was, top 5 in quick pressures and doing a great job in some of the underlying metrics early in the season. But he's not the same kind of dynamic up front, that speed rusher that you've got to really account for on every critical down and distance. And Von Miller, when he came back at the end of the season healthy, did do some of that. But at that number next year, I don't think he's going to be there. So you kind of need a party starter up front to go along with Epinesa and Greg Rousseau. And then in the back end, the AFC Championship made it abundantly clear, especially once you had the injury that got Kaiir Elam in the lineup. Yeah, you got to have corners that can stick with guys a little bit better here. I know not having Taylor Rapp in the game certainly hurt them, but you just saw when the Chiefs needed a bucket, they got their receivers going east and west. They got Xavier Worthy matched up one-on-one with these guys, and they just could not hang with them. And so you're hitting a moving target trying to figure out what it takes to beat the Chiefs because, Dad, it feels like that answer is different every year. But I do think that pass rusher and coverage, especially on the outside combination, something Buffalo's going to have to improve. Sean McDermott, great coordinator. Him and Bobby Babich did a phenomenal job, who's actually the play caller on that unit, maximizing the talent they had. But I think it's just that. I think they need more talent in those critical areas now.
And that's what they have to do, right? You have to draft and you have to get free agents, all with that in mind of beating Kansas City. What type of player do we need to beat Kansas City? Because Kansas City is the team right now. And that offense, while it isn't as explosive as it was a couple of years ago, still, you don't want Pat Mahomes with the ball to need a first down to ice the game or to score in the last drive to win the game, because he can do it. So you need to get players that can help stop a Kansas City offense. And that's job one. Because again, Buffalo offensively, listen, that old line, the 14 sacks. Now, again, that has to do with Josh Allen, A, being able to shake off rushers because of his size, and B, being able to take off and run. But still, that old line for Buffalo, I think is pretty underrated, Mike. I think that's a really, really good offensive line.
Yeah, oh no, I think that was one of the better lines in the league, and they had the thing that you can't always count on, which is health and continuity with that group almost all year long, and that's
right.
The only worry I have for them going forward, because you combine them with, what Alec Anderson was in their big boy packages. They were second in the NFL behind the Commanders in expected points added per rush. So one of the better running teams in the NFL. I do think, Dad, like James Cook, very good rusher. I think him and Josh Allen, great combination for that backfield. I think Ty Johnson is going to be a free agent, but you drafted Ray Davis, who was good in spurts for you this year out of that backfield as well.
Right.
I do think there was kind of an acknowledgement from Buffalo, hey, we need a number one wide receiver still. I don't know if Keon Coleman is going to be that guy based on what we've seen his rookie season. Mac Hollins was very good. Khalil Shakir was good in spurts, but they went out and tried to get Amari Cooper over there for a reason, and Amari's getting set to be a free agent, and I don't think he made the kind of impact that you were expecting. And so while Buffalo, not a team with a ton of cap space right now to go out and make this kind of move, I do feel like that still has to be the priority for that added dimension in the offense, for you to find someone that you can go out there and get a win with in a critical down and distance in that element of your game.
Yeah, I mean, again, the name is going to be T. Higgins, right? And I don't think Buffalo has the money for that unless they really start adjusting some of their cap. And I think T. Higgins is going to be the talk of the offseason from the wide receiver standpoint. I don't see Cincinnati franchising him again. That doesn't solve anything. And I just don't see them being able to afford him. So I think he's going to have a lot of suitors out there.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Godwin, like the other free agent market, like flawed players. Chris Godwin coming off an injury in Tampa Bay, going to be a free agent that I'm sure attracts a certain level of interest. Amari Cooper is going to be a guy that attracts a certain level of interest from teams. Stephon Diggs remember, that went down to Houston and got that contract reworked to be a 1-year deal. So now he's going to be a free agent, but also coming off an injury here. And so you look with that group, DeAndre Hopkins, like it is an older and certainly more beat up group of quality wide receivers outside of T. Higgins that are going to be coming to the party. And for T. Higgins, you mentioned pretty much everyone that's got money and a need at that position, the New England Patriots, the Washington Commanders, all going to be teams that are going to be looking his way and barking up that tree. And so if you're Buffalo, it's how can you go out there and continue to try and find diamonds in the rough? Because at this point, based on what you pay the quarterback and a bunch of other critical positions, that's kind of the tax bracket you have to play in.
Yeah, and T. Higgins, by the way, changed agent. His agent is now the same agent who represents Jamar Chase. So that agent represents Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. So that's a pretty nice payday that agent has coming. And again, Jamar Chase is going to get about $40 million a year. He's going to blow it out of the water of what Justin Jefferson made at $35 million a year. But I just don't think Cincinnati will have enough. And I think that agent will be shopping T. Higgins around for a nice deal somewhere else.
And remember, we still don't know. Like Joe Burrow, adamant that he wanted to bring both of those guys back, talked about doing whatever was necessary to make it happen. So we'll see. I mean, that still requires the Bengals to open up their pocketbooks and pay people, which is a story for another day. But either way, for Buffalo and Washington, very different roads back to it. Washington, plenty of work to do on defense. Buffalo, I'd expect them to keep being in contention. A lot of people didn't think they were going to be a team capable of this season, ahead of schedule after so much roster turnover for them, and yet back in the AFC Championship, still knocking on the door. Always the bridesmaid, never the bride. Feels so bad for our friend Christine Lisi. Back after this, GoJo Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. In women's college basketball, Vanderbilt freshman Michaela Blakes had a night to remember. She poured in 53 points on 16 of 24 shooting while going 5 of 9 from three-point land. The 53 is the second most points by a freshman in D1 history, only behind Delaware's Elena Del Don's 54 in 2010. Blake's 53 points also tied the Exact Tech Arena at O'Connell Center scoring record set by LSU men's basketball player Mahmoud Abdul Rauf during the 1988-89 season. Blake's also becomes the first Commodore since 1999 to have back-to-back games with 30-plus points.
All right, hour number 2 of GoJo and Golic here. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield. Hoping to talk to Tim Grunhard, former Kansas City Chiefs offensive lineman, former Notre Dame offensive lineman as well here. A guy we've known for a good long time about what the Chiefs are doing in preparation, trying to go for a third straight Super Bowl, all those great things. But before we get to that, Dad, did you catch any of the Pro Bowl Skills Challenge? Pro Bowl really having a tough PR week, I think, coming off of all of the alternates being named to this one. Drake May, I think the player that was the lightning rod for a lot of people. J.J. Watt going out here being critical of what we're doing, calling it the Participation Bowl. And then you get the Skills Challenge last night that, like we've talked about with the NBA, A for effort, I don't know how I felt about the execution. What about you?
Yeah, you try different events. This year they had trivia questions as well thrown in there.
I like the trivia. I thought that was the best part.
I didn't mind the trivia at all. The thing I could have done without was the spiking contest, of which Quinnen Williams won it. They spiked it onto a plate, and it's kind of like the punching bag. You punch the speed bag, and it shows you the power that you have. You spike the ball onto a plate, and it shows you the power. That had everybody standing around just watching a spike. It was kind of bleh.
That was the bad part, is they just needed to figure out where to put guys, because it seemed like we were hanging out in the parking lot after the function where no one wants to go home yet, and everyone's just kind of making small talk and knows what to do with their hands. That being said, the one thing I came away from that, we need to pay centers and guards more, because you saw the effortless power from Quinnen Williams, who won, and Dexter Lawrence, who really only lost because he didn't hit it flush on the thing. The effortless power from those men is a terrifying reminder that we actually found the Hulk, and his name is Dexter Lawrence. So I'm with you. It was weird. Like, Terry Crews is rolling all of that. I just didn't think he was a fit that made a ton of sense for them. Like, I got nothing against the guy, but it just seems sort of random to shove him into this situation. And so, all in all, Dad, I say for the Pro Bowl, for years, my solution to all of this was let him play basketball. Every NFL player thinks that they're the best basketball player God's ever created. I sat in my locker room in Notre Dame in college and listened to our guys talk about how they believed they could field a starting five of our football players that could beat our scholarship men's basketball team. That is the confidence that every football player carries inside them for the most part. I knew I was bad at basketball, and I never had such dreams or aspirations. The NFL's never going to do that. The players are never going to do that. Their agents, the teams, everyone will recoil at the notion of these guys and going out and do that. So I say make the whole thing a game show. I liked the trivia questions. I think that taking them out of the physical arena and putting them into one where they've got to do more of that would get the best out of the competition. We get the guys engaged differently. I am all for making the Pro Bowl one big game show.
I still like some of the physical competitions, but make them outside of football, like they're kind of doing. Keep kind of tinkering with them, and let basketball be one of them. Let a game to 10 or whatever be one of the events. I mean, listen, yeah, you're used to these guys playing football. You're not used to the Bosa brothers, Joey and Nick Bosa, speed walking the first leg of a relay. I mean, I like seeing athletes do physical things outside of their sports. That's why I like the old Superstars competition, where you had these athletes in all different sports doing all different kind of events that were outside of their actual event, where they still can show a physical prowess, but just not in what sport you're involved in.
Yeah, again, basketball would be pie in the sky. I don't think they would ever actually allow them to do that, because someone would get hurt, because basketball these guys would actually care about.
Yep.
And that's the thing that every league is chasing right now, is how do we make our athletes care about this exhibition? Baker Mayfield was on set with the NFL Live folks and basically said, I came here straight from the Bahamas or wherever he was on vacation. Most of these guys haven't played football in a while. They're coming back here in off-season mode, and then you're expecting them to get back into that. That's why I'm saying the solution is either you incur the risk of injury and you let them do what they really want to do, which is every player to a man play basketball, or you turn the whole thing into Double Dare back from the Nickelodeon days, something that maybe a lot of them are too young to really understand or appreciate the gravity of, but you go that route, make it all a game show, take the physical out of it, and we just want to see them compete. Whatever it is, we just want to watch them compete. And right now, I don't feel like the competition is enough of an incentive based on the way this. Even dodgeball was only okay for me this year.
I still want to see them compete. Maybe they just switch around the sports. You could mix in the trivia as well, like they tried to this year. But listen, they have fully embraced non-football, right? They have fully embraced it. Nothing that looks like NFL, with a flag football game and a tug of war and a dodgeball. They have fully embraced everything but football, which I like. They just have to keep kind of tinkering with it to see. And I don't know what the ratings are going to be. That obviously plays a part in it of who's watching it. But they also have to do something with these players, especially the linemen, because the linemen aren't playing in the games in a 7-on-7 game. And listen, as far as J.J. Watt saying at the participation game, this has been going on forever. Even when the game was actually played with the game, you had alternates. You had the third, fourth, fifth alternate making the team.
Oh, but it's so much more now than it used to be, because I really think post Tyler Eifert injury in this game, people looked at it a lot differently.
Well, people also used to have a trip to Hawaii. Now, nothing against Orlando, but you're going to Orlando. I mean, there's a big difference there. It used to be a nice family vacay to Hawaii, where the team and the families all stayed at a separate resort. It was beautiful. I mean, and it was after the Super Bowl. Everybody kind of chilled. It was a whole different environment where players actually wanted to go, and rarely, or I shouldn't say rarely, but a lot less you would get players to back out. Players who want to go to again, nothing against Orlando, but Orlando, Hawaii, there's not a big there's a big difference there.
I will say I do feel like also the money now, like these players are rich enough where it's like I can go somewhere even nicer than Hawaii too. Like I can go and craft the vacation of my dreams with the millions of dollars that the guys in the Pro Bowl would probably be making. So there is also that. It's a tough target for them to hit. I applaud the effort. I just think we're still not quite there yet. Quarterback skills competition, they're throwing the ball. It's like the 3-point contest. Never going to go out of style. Love that one.
Right. Yeah, Jared Goff won that. Jared Goff, yeah. And the NFC is looking for their third straight win. Eli Manning, who's coaching the NFC, keeps talking about the Chiefs three-peat. He's saying, how about the NFC three-peat? And then they have a lead going into the still more of the competitions. But, I think they just keep tinkering with it, try and make it as palatable as possible, try and get players to show up and not have, if you're injured, you're injured. You're not going to go. But it does get kind of, eyebrow raising when the fourth and fifth alternate are. Now listen, I would have loved that. Yeah. I would have loved putting Pro Bowl next to my name, even if I was the sixth alternate.
It's a work in progress, all of it, but we're trying to captivate interest in a way that's difficult for everyone involved here. Dad, speaking of trying to captivate interest here, or I should say retain talent, let's get to a little headline from college football I wanted to talk about for a lot of today. We're in the off-season version of the sport now. We're waving goodbye to our large adult sons at the Senior Bowl, at all these other outings, and watching them get ready to go on to their NFL dreams. But for the ones who stay, interesting situation in the ACC. We knew that last time on Dragon Ball Z, they had been getting sued by some of their own constituents. Florida State, Clemson wanted to try and get out of their grant of rights and see if they could go to greener pastures because relative to their peers in the SEC, the Big Ten, these other conferences, the ACC and their TV deal with ESPN had not been making a lot of money. Well, that deal is going to continue. ESPN agreed to pick up its option to continue broadcasting ACC sports through 2036. So they signed this deal back in 2016. There was an out that I believe after the 26 or 27 season would have had them parting ways if they wanted to. But if you're ESPN, this is a great deal for you. You get continued inventory of one of the four major leagues remaining, and you do it at a bargain price. But now the interesting part is, Dad, amongst this deal that'll keep them around there, the ACC and Clemson seem like they're inching towards a settlement that would keep those two schools inside the conference and do so by incentivizing the teams that are the big brands with a little bit of extra money here, essentially a brand fund that at the end of the year would reward the teams that through engagement, all these different metrics for basically popularity. How popular is your brand? How much money are you bringing to the conference with the eyeballs on your games and with all the ancillary things, feeding extra money to those teams through this, pool of money. And so, Dad, this is interesting to me because that's a precedent setter that I'm sure the SEC and the Big Ten are going to notice soon. We know a lot of those teams are not like the others. Yeah. And so if I'm the bottom of the barrel SEC or Big Ten team, I'm looking at this and starting to get a little bit concerned because I think this is only a matter of time before other leagues start to orient themselves in this same way, the same way the ACC kind of has to keep its big boys happy because they just need everyone to stay together right now so that they're still viable.
Yeah, it used to be, who's the best conference? Hey, we're the best conference. We're the best conference. Now it's like, oh, by the way, we're one of the better teams in the conference, so we should be, paid more. So it's certainly gotten to be more specific, and this will help Clemson and Florida State in the football realm, North Carolina, Duke in the basketball realm because it'll include football, men's and women's basketball as far as the extra money. So this may get Clemson and Florida State to drop their lawsuit. Clemson and Florida State also looking to, now this deal goes to 2036, also looking by 2031 to have a smaller exit fee if they should decide to leave, because that's obviously something that stops a team from leaving is these monster exit fees, and they're looking to have that lessened by 2031.
Yeah, Nicole Auerbach pointed that out in the ESPN story, that as part of the settlement, Clemson and Florida State were asking the ACC to agree for that in 2031. The reason that date's important and the reason you should pay attention to it is because that's when the TV contracts for the other big conferences come up. The Big Ten, the SEC, and the Big 12 all have their contracts expire that year. And so if you're a person that has been worried about or a person that has been wanting the super conference, 2031 is probably the year that you start to need to consider that. Because, Dad, the other portion of this conversation with Florida State and Clemson and, these brands in the ACC that were unhappy that they're not making as much as their counterparts and they want to, get out of this grant of right, it takes two to tango. And Ross Dellinger, I thought, did a good job of pointing this out in his article on Yahoo Sports. I don't think the SEC and the Big Ten were necessarily lining up to dilute all that new money they got with a couple more teams added to the mix. Those deals are signed. Yep. The ink is dry on that page. And so now all of a sudden, if you're inviting someone else in there and you're one of the member institutions, well, that's just less money that's going to you now because you've got to help pay another one of these teams coming in. And so that's it takes two to tango situation. So if you're Clemson and Florida State, I do also think there's part of you that was willing to come back and hear out what the ACC had because there wasn't that soft landing spot that you thought necessarily would be there at the beginning when you started pounding on the table.
Yeah, you're right. These conferences that are adding teams, it does just dilute the money. So I agree. I do think the Big Ten and the SEC will eventually go to a somewhat like the ACC of branding, and the better teams will get more money, which again is, and people hate Notre Dame for it, is why Notre Dame will stay independent. Notre Dame keeps every dime. And again, don't tell me though all those teams that are seeing this wouldn't love to trade spots with Notre Dame.
Well, this is what's going to get interesting for Notre Dame is as I think we get closer to playoff reform too, and we're talking about more spaces carved out for automatic qualifiers for conferences. People thinking, the Big Ten and the SEC want 4 teams apiece, the ACC and the Big 12 maybe 2 teams apiece, something in that. It could get harder for Notre Dame as the at-large. I'm keeping an eye on their relationship with the ACC because part of this agreement that's supposed to soothe Clemson and Florida State and some of that stuff is an agreement and an understanding that the big boys are going to play more often. And that includes Notre Dame. They said coming out of this deal, it's going to mean Notre Dame plays Clemson, Florida State, and Miami more, the big brands matching up to give people more of what they want. And so does that mean Notre Dame eventually gets included in the ACC's carve-out in the big dance if that's the way that this goes? Are they on the outside looking in and now looking at fewer spots for at-large teams the way they would occupy? One way or another, they're going to be involved in more big games against the ACC's best, and so that's good for Notre Dame from a scheduling standpoint, strength of schedule-wise, good for TV dollars. The eventual reorg around the CFP is going to be the thing that ultimately decides their fate as an independent.
Well, we all know that's the big thing for Notre Dame, right? The ease of getting into the playoffs. They will give up the fact of having a first-round bye to get into the playoffs because there are so many at-large selections to keep the money. And again, I cannot blame them one bit. But yeah, if it gets squeezed and there's less spots to get in, that is there's always what can force Notre Dame into a conference. That certainly would be something that could force Notre Dame to a conference.
Yep, so something to keep an eye on. But again, the result sounds like Florida State, Clemson staying put right now. The ACC on ESPN through at least 2036, and more big-time games between the big-time programs to try and put money in the big-time pockets. We'll be back after this. GoJo and Golic. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. As promised, we always love when we can add a little bit of beef, or reformed beef, I should say, because you look great right now, to the show. Tim Grunhard, kind enough to join us, former Notre Dame and Kansas City Chiefs offensive lineman, to talk a little bit about Super Bowl 59 as we get in the lead up here. Good morning, Tim. How you doing?
Hey, good morning, everybody out there in DraftKings land. It's great to be on with the Golics. Love the family, love you guys. Good Notre Dame people. Although I have a bone to pick with Mike Sr.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if I ever told you this, but in 1991, we played against you guys at Arrowhead Stadium. You and I obviously having the big matchup, the two tough Notre Dame guys battling against each other, the Kansas City Chiefs against the Philadelphia Eagles, which we're about to see coming up here in about a week. We had this screenplay that we had drawn up all week, and I was going to be the superhero on this play, right? So what we're going to do is there's kind of a middle screen, and we knew how aggressive you guys were up front, just kind of like the Philadelphia Eagles are now with Williams and Davis and Carter and Smith getting up the field. We knew you guys were going to get up the field. It was a great plan where I was going to kind of be leading the running back as he stuck behind the nose tackle for a middle screen. And we practiced it all week. It worked all week. The play gets called in the game, and Mike reads the play, stops, reaches up and knocks the ball down, and ruins my one chance to be a hero.
So one thing that you guys didn't scout is the fact that I was a horrible pass rusher. And the fact that I didn't get beyond the line of scrimmage much, while Jerome Brown and Reggie White and Clyde Simmons were all up the field guys. I was tough to fool on a screen because I was still on the line of scrimmage. And the whole idea of a screen is to get the D-line up the field.
I will counteract that with I was a horrible pass protector, so I thought you would have beat me. So I don't know. What?
Dad ruining your moment of glory here on that play. An interesting precursor to this matchup. And to your point, a matchup we get to see again now. You guys on the side commenting instead of holding steady at the line of scrimmage there. And Tim, for you now on the radio, 810 WHB in Kansas City, trying to figure out what has been the story with this year's Chiefs team. I mean, we talk about this dynasty in its totality so much, with them going for the three-peat, something that's never been done, and Mahomes and Reed and what they're starting to put together all-time legacy-wise. But every year is its own living, breathing thing. And I think the Chiefs, what they've done better than almost any team in recent memory is figure out what each year's team identity is and exploit that. So as you guys are now back in a familiar territory, getting ready for the Super Bowl here, what's emerged as this Chiefs team's identity relative to the rest of the dynasty?
Yeah, well, first of all, getting penalties, I guess, in their favor has been their identity, according to every national prognosticator. Now, listen, I think Spags' defense, and Mike, I know you know Spags very well. Spags' defense is just unbelievable. He's done such a wonderful job of keeping people kind of off balance on the offensive side. They've done a really good job of keeping games close. Patrick Mahomes, he's just a winner, guys. He's just a competitor. He's a winner. The guy just knows how to finish football games. So in a perfect scenario, you have a defense that keeps games close, and you have a quarterback that believes he can win every game in the fourth quarter. Give him the ball with 2 minutes left. Give him the ball with 1 minute left. He's going to go down there and score and win the game. You got a pretty good combination, a pretty good mixture of personalities and everything else. The other thing is, too, I think that's really underrated with the Kansas City Chiefs is, you always have a lot of great players, but these coaches have been together forever. Usually when you win a Super Bowl, every coach gets poached. Everybody leaves. You look at Spags, and you look at Dave Tobe, and you look at Nagy, you look at Andy Heck, you look at Dave Merritt. All those guys have been together now for so long, going through this period of going to Super Bowls. And it's just, when you have that same message and you have those coaches that really, the X's and O's are very familiar with the players, and they know each other very well as far as the coaching staff, it's a really deadly combination.
So one of the things for the Chiefs this year that has been a bit of an issue has been the left tackle position. They've gone through a couple of guys, and now you have a guard, and Mike being an interior lineman, you being an interior lineman. So, Tim, explain it to me. explain it to everybody in layman's terms, not your guys' offensive line's terms, because the casual fan sees a guy switch positions, think, oh, there's nothing to it. Well, Joe Thuney's an all-pro guard, and he moves out to tackle where all of a sudden you're on an island. And he's doing a damn good job. So just explain the difficulty for an interior lineman to move out to a tackle position.
I know you guys are big bowlers, right? Up there in Connecticut, the Golic family, every Friday night going beer bowling. I know you guys do that all the time. So if you were going beer bowling and you were able to put those bumpers up in the gutters, right? I think you'd probably bowl a pretty good game, wouldn't you? So as an interior lineman, you always have those bumpers. You always have those kind of guys next to you that, you can rely on, you can lean on. If you're getting beat outside, you can run them into that bumper. You can run them into the bumper, you're getting beat outside. When you're playing tackle, there's no bumpers. You're out there on your own, and there's some gutter balls that could be thrown if you don't have proper technique and fundamentals. So Joe Thuney moving out there is unbelievable. First of all, if you want to just talk a little bit about logistics, length is so important at the tackle position, especially left tackle position. You want to have that separation. You want to have those guys being able to get their hands on people and keep them kind of off your body and be able to run guys out of the pocket. Our offensive line coaches, all the way starting with Joe Moore, all the way through Mike Solari with the Kansas City Chiefs, always said, listen, you got to keep that pocket deep and wide. And at the tackle position, you're in charge of keeping that width. And for Joe Thuney to move out there and do the things that he does with limited length, limited athleticism, but just true grit and toughness is pretty special.
It really has been impressive to watch, and that bumper bowling metaphor is one of the best I've ever heard in explaining that difference between the two spots and the exposure that you have there. You mentioned the coaches to go along with it, though. How has no one come and plucked Spags or Andy Heck out of there for anything at this point? Like, what has been the secret? What sort of deal did Andy Reid make with these guys? Like, it seems amazing to me that especially Spags, who sounds like wants to be a head coach again at some point, has not gotten the opportunity and keeps winding up back in Andy Reid's lap.
Yeah, I think maybe just the impatience of the NFL. I think by the time that these guys are available, everybody's hired somebody. So, I mean, that's been kind of the dirty little secret for the Kansas City Chiefs, is they made these deep runs in the playoffs and gone to the Super Bowl the last 3 or 4 years. And everybody's like, well, yeah, we'd love to be able to talk to Spags, love to be able to talk to Nagy, love to be able to talk to Dave Tobe. But by the time they get an opportunity to talk to him, by the time they really get an opportunity to, settle in and give him an interview, they're still playing. So that could be one thing. Number two is I think Spags kind of had a kind of a raw deal in St. Louis back in the day when he was with the Rams. And I think a lot of people said, maybe he's not a head coach. Maybe he's just a defense coordinator. But being around Spags and being around the kind of relationships he has with not only the defensive guys, the offensive guys, but that coaching staff, he'd be a great head coach. I think a lot of times you like that shiny new nickel. There's a lot of young coaches, but God bless them, that are in their early 30s and mid 30s that are getting jobs. And now all of a sudden you're looking at a guy that's 70 years old. So yeah, I think that might be part of it too, but we're glad that they haven't been poached yet, because it's been a good run.
So Spagnuolo doing a great job. Vic Fangio coming into Philadelphia and doing a nice job with the defense. And they have nice toys to play with. Again, going to the interior offensive line, you have Chris Jones at the interior D line for Kansas City, and Jalen Carter, who's been an absolute monster this year. So people, again, casual fan will just say, well, just slide to them every time. And we know, obviously, as football players, you can't do that. The defense can set it so where you have to slide the other way and actually have one-on-one situation. So when watching Chris Jones and Jalen Carter play, what's the best way to try and take them on?
Yeah, so one of the things that we always talked about as interior offensive linemen, especially against those dominant defensive linemen, is don't overset. Because what they're trying to do is they're trying to get you to pop outside, because those guys, and Mike, as well as I do, and Mike Jr., as being an interior guy, those defensive linemen, they're trying to get inside. That's where they want to go. They don't want to beat you around the edge. They don't want to beat you if they're in a 1 or 2 technique going all the way outside. They're going to get inside. So one of the things you got to do is you got to be able to make sure that you're not oversetting and giving them that inside route to the quarterback. So a lot of timer steps, not really moving that outside foot, even in a 3 technique. Just pick that up and put it down, because those guys are going to want to go inside. Those guys are such dominant football players, and really, if you look at just the stats of the NFL right now, which is different than when we played, Mike, it's more about pressures now than sacks. I mean, everybody could talk about sack. They don't come as often as they used to, because you don't have a Steve DeBerg doing a 7-step drop and then taking a hitch and then looking around for somebody, right? These guys are getting rid of the ball so quickly, but both of those guys do an unbelievable job of getting underneath offensive linemen and getting pressure and collapsing that pocket and getting that quarterback off his spot so that he can't throw as quickly as he wants. So I would contend that these guys are 2 of the best at getting pressure on the quarterback in the middle of the pocket, which is hard to do.
Extremely hard to do, and for Chris Jones especially to do it in so many big moments in the postseason. He's become one of the real closers that we've seen in the defensive line in postseason history. Being a part of a lot of those big moments, Grunny, you brought it up before, also means that there can be a lot of moments that people remember. And this year, it really does seem to be people harping on the penalty call, specifically for Patrick Mahomes. How annoying has that been around Kansas City, around this team, to constantly hear that now as the thing, as this team is on the cusp of history, that so many people seem to want to focus on?
Yeah, you're going for a 3-peat, and you've won a bunch of Super Bowls. I know there's a lot of Chief kind of apathy out there, and there's a little bit of people just so tired of talking about the Kansas City Chiefs, and really, I don't blame you. I mean, I really don't. But the reality is that the Kansas City Chiefs have just an unbelievable run, a lot like the Patriots did in the 2000s, in the early 2000s. And then you guys, I know you guys watched it. I know you did, Mike, the Chicago Bulls back in the 90s. I mean, everybody said, well, Jordan gets every call, this, and that. Hey, this is part of what happens when you're winning a lot of football games, and they're going to take care of the quarterback. But a lot of times it seems like in big plays they get big calls, and that's just been kind of the way it's gone this year. It's a couple of years before they didn't get those calls. I love when everybody says, well, hey, they want the Kansas City Chiefs to win a Super Bowl. It's all fixed. Well, if you think about it, if they were going to fix something and give the Kansas City Chiefs an opportunity to win a Super Bowl, they probably would have done it when Lamar Hunt was alive. The guy who is the grandfather of the NFL, started the AFL, was the guy who named the Super Bowl, who really had 1 or 2 Super Bowls in the whole time he owned the team. So why didn't they, if they were going to cheat when Lamar Hunt was alive in the 90s, so I could have won a couple? That's what I don't get.
Yeah, there you go. All comes back to us and why it couldn't have worked for us.
Really,
listen, only about a minute to go. I don't blame Pat Mahomes for if he does get calls, because great players get calls. Do you think the league should replay more of the feet first slide, or the dancing before they go out of bounds by a quarterback, or even the roughing the quarterback?
Mike, you know the answer to that question already. You and I, we played in the trenches. We're hitting each other every play. No yellow jerseys on us, buddy. So, no, I do. I think, listen, they got to think about, the thing that bugs me the most is the going out of bounds deal, where all of a sudden he looks like he's going out of bounds, and then everybody pulls up and then they run another 5 yards. So that's something they certainly have to look at. As far as the slide, I thought they've done a pretty good job with the slide. I do think quarterbacks take advantage of that a little bit. Maybe you should slide a little bit earlier, but the timing and everything else is it's just the way football is. It's always going to be a really tough call. But I would agree with you wholeheartedly on this running out of bounds stuff, and you're getting ready to run out of bounds. The guy pulls up because 9 out of 10 times when you hit a quarterback down by the sideline, they're going to throw a flag. And all of a sudden now he's sneaking for another 5 or 6 yards. I'm not into that. I don't care who it is, whether it's Patrick Mahomes or Jalen Hurts. I don't care.
Equal opportunity for something that definitely needs a look this offseason, and I think we'll get one here. Tim, really appreciate you giving us some time. Great catching up with you. Enjoy a continued part of this incredible dynastic Chiefs run. I'm sure it's been a lot of fun from where you sit, and it's certainly going to be a lot of fun to watch this week.
It'll be a lot of fun. And you know what? You didn't bring up Notre Dame. That's a record. We'll talk to you guys later.
Yeah. You're right.
Exactly.
You're right.
Zig when everyone
Thanks,
thinks
Rooney.
that we're going to zag. We'll zag towards the NBA All-Star game and the alternates announced on this roster next on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr. here with you guys. The NBA All-Star roster has officially been announced. So now let's break it down. Fellas, as usual, people on the internet have beef. Do you have any beef with the selections? Do you feel like anybody was snubbed here? I mean, you know, you look at this list and what kind of jumps out to you? No Trae Young, no LaMelo Ball. What do we think?
Yeah, so the reserves got announced yesterday here. We had the starters for each conference announced. And the reserves, not a lot of surprises. Victor Wembanyama, his first selection amongst the Western Conference, joined by Jalen Williams, Jaren Jackson Jr., Anthony Edwards, Anthony Davis. Names you'd expect there. Tyler Hero gets his first selection in the Eastern Conference, along with Evan Mobley, Cade Cunningham in Detroit. Darius Garland, the Cavaliers, Dad, the only team in the NBA with 3 NBA All-Star selections. The Celtics, Lakers, and Knicks all had 2 to go along the way there. Karl Anthony Towns joins Jalen Brunson in the Eastern Conference All-Stars. And, Dad, I think the Trae Young snub, understandable. Like, that's one of those, because the team has been snake-bitten injury-wise and been bad this year, it's obscured what's been objectively one of his best seasons in a way that probably warranted an All-Star appearance.
But what I don't understand, listen, the starters it's a 50% fan vote, okay? So fans want to see certain players. Current NBA players, 25%, media panel, 25%. So you have 3 different entities voting for the starter. But the 7 players that are reserves in each conference are selected by NBA head coaches. So that's what's surprising to me. So even if a team is down, you can recognize a player playing well. Trae Young leads the league in assists. Leads the league. LaMelo Ball is 4th in scoring. So I'm a little surprised. And again, this is NBA coaches. So listen, they're way more involved in the NBA than I am. I'm just looking at as an outsider looking in, and they break it down more. But these are two guys near the top, one at the top in a certain category, and another guy near the top in what people think are the most important category in scoring, and not making it, which seems to be a little bit of a head scratcher.
It is an interesting cocktail that creates the roster in the process. I'm with you. And I do think there's also part of this where the All-Star game certainly matters to an extent. But I think for the NFL, the NBA, All-Pro teams, those are the ones that players generally put more weight to. And hell, in the NBA can have a financial impact on a lot of guys here in a process that still is something that we question all the time, giving the media that power with the All-NBA team to go and influence pockets the way it does. And so I'm with you on those complaints here. I do think it's funny, Trae Young came out and was very vocal about this, said it's not getting snubbed anymore, it's getting traded. Mark Cuban, an interesting tact for him, the Dallas Mavericks owner, came out and quote tweeted something about Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving both not being out there. Luka obviously been dealing with injury in a way that, makes that interesting. But Mark Cuban's quote was, "Those TV ratings for All-Star are going to be crazy, LOL. NBA going to NBA, just insane that Luka and Kai aren't going. One, using ratings as the sell for your guys. Interesting tact given what this is supposed to be about. And the notion, I'm sorry, that anyone is going to tune in more or less to the All-Star game because of Kyrie or Luka Doncic is assuming a bit much about those guys." I get they're captivating, but at this point, Dad, the All-Star game's problems are a lot more existential than just, we're missing these two guys, so we can't possibly do this.
Yeah, I completely agree. And another guy that kind of got snubbed, he's on a team that is not talked about a lot, and that's the Sacramento Kings. They're sitting in the 10th slot right now, the last playing team. Domantas Sabonis, NBA best 42 double-doubles and NBA best 14.5 rebounds a game. And not selected. It does seem somewhat odd. Again, as an outsider looking in, I'm putting a lot on stats, but I mean, again, these are NBA coaches that are selecting the reserves. It just seems a little odd that a guy just goes off in double doubles and leads the league in rebounds and is not on the team.
Yeah, it's a bit strange. At the same time, like it's always that rule, like you got to take someone off to put it on. I look at this group, and for the most part, pretty strong group that they're fielding on both sides here. Representation, Alperen Sengun from the Houston Rockets, who been a ton of fun to watch. That young team, one of the best in the Western Conference right now. And Dad, I guess this is always the thing, too, is this is a good spot to celebrate a lot of those things, because the worry I always have going into the postseason, and maybe less so now because we saw a team like Oklahoma City last year, who a lot of people looked and said maybe a bit ahead of schedule, all of a sudden make a good run. But it used to be for the longest time when you would see these teams sitting at 1 or 2 in the East or Western Conference during the regular season, this understanding that especially if it's a young team that has not yet made postseason runs and gotten that experience, you're always hesitant of how much does that regular season success really matter. You got a young team who's more inclined to get their guys out there, play a lot of minutes, have their best out there, versus these teams with older stars that are used to playing into the postseason, having more of the rest be a part of the equation and prioritizing and prorating that point of the season. I do wonder, because Houston has been so stellar defensively here, because their young stars seem to be stepping up, and because, again, Oklahoma City kind of showed us the ball going through the basket before anyone else, can these teams actually go and match it with some postseason success so that all of a sudden, like that to me, Dad, is what would continue to give the NBA's regular season more juice. You've got teams right now where we're getting to know some of these young star players. They not only have to have like all-star appearances, this place that used to be a prime exposure before national TV games were such a big part of the NBA diet. Now it's you need these players, yes, to get those accolades, but you need them to have a couple of wins in the early rounds of the postseason so that the NBA community at large gets to know them a lot better than we do now.
Yeah, that would be, listen, Cleveland leading the East, I think, is still a surprise to some. But the Rockets have to be the surprise team of the year, again, to the casual fan looking in, sitting there second in the conference. And Memphis, seeing what they could do with Ja Morant actually on the court, right? I mean, him being on the court and the moves that they made in the offseason have certainly paid off. Because, it's not part – we all expected Oklahoma City to be there, but then there's the Nuggets and, the Clippers, but they lose Paul George, but they're getting old. The Lakers sitting there in the fifth slot. We keep saying, are they going to make a move? Are they going to make a move? They're the most talked about team in the NBA because of LeBron. And can they make a move as LeBron's career is winding down? Can they go for one more title? And they're sitting there on 7-3 in their last 10 games and playing well at this point.
Yeah, it is. God, the Lakers are such a fascinating thing in general, too, because I do feel like there's so many people now just waiting around to dunk on Bronny every time he sees the court, too. I think Jeremy Taché brought this up on Le Batard yesterday. We have never paid attention to the 5th pick in the draft to know if they are getting these kind of minutes or struggling in same spots. But because he's got Bron's name, every time he takes the court, he's either going to be the most talked about thing the next day because he overperformed expectations or because he got blocked or because he missed a shot. And now everyone's going to meme and make fun of the kid. It's a rough way to have to go through your early development in the NBA. And some of how they've approached that with him not being full-time in the G League certainly plays a part in that. You wonder if he didn't have Bron's last name and he was just allowed to go and develop like anybody else, would it be a better or worse situation for him? I don't know, but he's certainly bearing the brunt of a lot of criticism that I think has very little to do with his actual development relative to other people in his range.
Yeah, listen, when he plays in G League games, he's spoon-fed. When he goes up to the big team, he's fed by a fire hose, right? That's what people look at. And listen, he had a tough game against Tyrese Maxey and the 76ers. Even J.J. Redick came out and said it. And he had his best game against Washington. Not shockingly, Washington's the worst team in the league. But, you saw him on the big stage have his best game. But you're right. The spotlight shines way brighter on Bronny. And listen, he knew it was going to happen. It's going to happen. Anytime he steps on the big floor of the NBA team, it's going to happen. Does he deserve to be there? Should he be there? Should he be getting these minutes? But you're right. We don't break down the 55th pick of the draft. Now, those that are saying he shouldn't have been the 55th pick, but we don't break down the 55th pick of the draft. But he will get an incredible amount of, obviously, lights and eyes on him.
Probably a big reason why, as we talk about the All-Star reserves, Bronny and LeBron turned down the opportunity to participate in the skills challenge together, trying to manage a little bit more of that workload and the load of eyeballs already on a player, just trying to develop his game enough to be one of these guys that can eventually be in the mix for all of these different things. So will be interesting to watch what the NBA does with that, the 4-team version of this, all of that stuff. But coming up next, we have to try one man for his crimes against humanity. Dan Orlovsky step in front of the congregation next. All right, let's wrap up the show of the week the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you into the weekend and to send us to New Orleans for Super Bowl 59. Check out all of our content there starting Monday next week, live 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern from the Big Easy. Looking forward to it. Going to be a fun one. As always, download, subscribe, rate, review the show. Leave us a 5-star rating. Watch us Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Subscribe to the YouTube channel ahead of next week. Get all of the stuff that we give you from Radio Row in a one-stop shop there. Thank you to our guest today, Tim Grunhard, former Notre Dame and Kansas City Chiefs O-lineman, for helping us break down the matchup from the Kansas City side of the street here. If you missed that, check it out wherever you get the pods or on the YouTube channel. Let's get started. I am very hungry, and this, that, and the third today is ready to cater to that. Front Office Sports reported yesterday that McDonald's has announced the Angel Reese special, its first ever meal special with a female athlete. It features a barbecued bacon quarter pounder with cheese, topped with a new barbecue sauce, plus fries and a drink. Dad, I'll say this. McDonald's obviously a slice of Americana in terms of fast food. I hadn't been there in a while until I got stuck in the Atlanta airport overnight. There was a McDonald's, like a beacon in the night, right next to my gate. And outside of the crushing disappointment I felt when I went over there expecting the ice cream machine to work, shame on me. But getting McDonald's and actually getting a meal there for the first time in a while, they still got it. Whatever chemical it is in there that's designed to make that thing taste real good to me works well. So I'm absolutely in on the Angel Reese special here. I'm happy to give this a try.
Oh, congrats to Angel Reese. That is just fantastic. Now, growing up, I used to have the McDonald's by our house in Willowick, Ohio. I used to get the Big Mac all the time. I was a Big Mac freak. But I kind of lost my love for it. I would still eat it occasionally, but I'm all in on the quarter pounder. All in on the quarter pounder. All in on the fries. I am all in. Now you're talking putting bacon on the quarter pounder and barbecue sauce on the quarter pounder. I'm salivating talking about it. And having something named after you. I was fortunate enough a few years ago, Legends Restaurant on campus at Notre Dame, right by the stadium, which used to be Senior Bar when your mother and I were there. It's Legends. It's a restaurant now. They named a burger after me for a short time, which is a very, very cool thing. So for Angel Reese, I mean, to have her name on a McDonald's product is very cool. So congrats to her, and I will go out and I will definitely be trying this burger.
You are right, Dad. Relative to the Big Mac, double quarter pounder, better ratio. Too much bread in the Big Mac. That was always my issue with the sandwich. What you want to do is the double quarter pounder with cheese or the McDouble with Big Mac sauce. Still get that in the mix because it's worth the price of admission.
Yes.
But then get down your bun to meat ratio and have a better time with it. So that, I think, the good secret sauce for. By the way, Angel, just the right name. Like, she's already had her own box of Reese's Puffs too. She was blessed with an incredibly marketable name, great personality and game to go with it. And so now it's the perfect nexus of all that, where women's athletics finally getting the stage it deserves. And so we get to see Angel Reese reap all the benefit that someone that's got a last name that lines up with a brand should absolutely hit. Love that for her. So jealous. Jesse, you're probably disgusted with all this, correct?
I mean, a little bit, but I'm interested in the new barbecue sauce. It says it's new barbecue sauce, so I'll be interested to see what that's about, okay?
Yeah, I don't know what new is barbecue sauce. So I'm interested as well, because you have different tangy barbecue sauce, different barbecue sauces. I don't know what's new about it, but you know what? I will test it and find out.
We'll find out, yeah.
No, we will find out there. All official taste testing that. Jesse's got to taste test some Taco Bell down in New Orleans, and we have to move on to that, Jesse. What do we got here?
Yeah, okay, so according to his Golf Channel interview, right now, Pebble Beach Pro-Am's going on, Shane Lowry brought beer and pizza for the media center after he had an insane hole-in-one. So obviously just great work by him. But also, guys, I was reading something that said he has like some of the craziest career aces on the PGA Tour. So he had a 17th at TPC Sawgrass. He had a hole-in-one. 16th at Augusta National. And now the 7th at Pebble Beach. These are like iconic holes. Then he just has aces at them.
And he is a great personality on the tour. And by the way, that was the second hole-in-one at the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am. At Pebble, it was at Spyglass, the other course there. Rory McIlroy had a hole-in-one on the par 3 15th hole, and then a few hours later, Shane Lowry at Pebble Beach is the iconic par 3 7th hole. He had a hole-in-one, and I still don't understand the practice because I've never had a hole-in-one, but I don't know why the person getting the hole-in-one has to buy drinks for everybody. Now, Shane Lowry, not shockingly, supposedly bought beer and pizza for the entire media center after his hole-in-one. And the person hitting the hole-in-one is supposed to buy drinks for everybody. I don't understand that. I made a hole-in-one, yet I'm spending tons of money buying drinks for everybody else when they should be buying drinks for me.
I mean, I'm sure people bought him drinks too.
But you got to shell out a lot of money.
Now, for these guys make a lot of money, and so them buying pizza and beer for the media, which they eventually did. I saw James Colgan and then Claire Rogers from golf.com both posted pictures of a big bucket, a big chest of beers and 4 pizzas on the table, and that said it was catered by Rory McIlroy and Shane Lowry. So shout out to the fellas, 2 guys that have gotten close over the years, were a great part of some team golf events as well, going and doing right by the media because they have a ton of money. But Dad, I'm with you. For the layperson, like when we were at ESPN, we sold a bunch of golf trips somehow with Trey when we were on Golic and Wingo and got to go play golf at Whistling Straits. And one of the guys in our group hit a hole-in-one on like 17 right up by the water. It was one of the most incredible shots I've ever seen. And we're like, listen, we'll buy you the drinks inside. Like, the average person going and having to do that makes no sense to me here. So I'm with you. For everyone else, we got to change that practice. But for these guys, I kind of get it.
Oh, so this is a universal thing. If you hit a hole-in-one,
Oh,
you're
yeah.
supposed to...
Yeah, you don't just buy drinks for your group. You go into the clubhouse and you buy drinks for everybody. That's what you're supposed to do, and I never understood that. You get the hole-in-one, and you're going to go out there and buy drinks for everybody in the clubhouse bar. You know, I don't get it.
So you hit a hole-in-one, and then you're like, yes, and then you're like, I will never financially recover from this.
Yeah,
immediately.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yes.
We need to figure out where this came from and then put a stop to it. But congratulations to them. Good job by the guys for doing right with everybody there. Good, wholesome story. Total opposite for the third here, Jesse.
Yeah.
Let's get to this abomination.
Okay, Dan Orlovsky apparently this got put out there that this is how he eats Reese's, and we can show the video here. It's ridiculous.
Man. What is he doing?
Yeah.
So he's
Ryan Clark.
So what are you spitting out though?
He's biting it and then spitting out the chocolate.
So you're just trying to eat the
Apparently
peanut butter?
He doesn't like milk chocolate, and I guess my question is, Dan, do you know they just
What you gonna
sell
do with the
peanut
top of
butter?
it?
I mean, what are we doing?
This is thank you to Ryan
what
Clark
part are you
for
spitting
shining a light on one of the most psychotic things I've ever seen in my entire life. Dan Orlovsky, well known around the Twitter sphere for having some really weird, awful food takes and preferences, and to each their own. Usually, if you just want to eat something that's a little weird, I'm fine with that. But, Dad, when you go out here and desecrate a Reese's peanut butter cup like this, spitting out all the chocolate chunks, just to Jesse's point, so you can avoid doing the normal thing and just putting spoon in a jar of peanut butter and going on about your day, put him under the jail. I love Dan. He's a great father. He's an awesome friend. He seems to be a great analyst. But this is an abomination that should never see the light of God ever again.
So now I think Dan's doing it for the attention, to which he should get skewered for it. Because, yes, it's just as easy to grab a jar of peanut butter and just dip your finger in there or a spoon in there and eat it outside of spitting out the chocolate around a Reese's peanut butter cup. He deserves every barb thrown at him because he makes it public. He makes it public, his ridiculous food takes and eating habits that he puts out there. So he obviously wants the attention for it, and he's going to get the attention, and it's mostly going to be negative attention.
All press is good
I
press,
disagree
right?
that he is doing this for attention. He was too good at this. How he got the little chocolates into the wrapper, that was not his first time doing this. And that's what scares me. He's got children that are learning this is the way to eat Reese's peanut. They're watching their father eat like this. And we can't have that. We have got to go out here and provide the example for the world that Dan Orlovsky isn't right now. This scares me. Dan, seek help. We're going to see you in the Super Bowl, I'm sure, down in New Orleans. There's a lot of good food there. And if I see you do anything like this to some of the fine food they're making down there, I am just going to snap. We'll see you in New Orleans next week. Download, subscribe, rate, and review the show. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you guys Monday from the Big Easy.